Hi, Patty.
Hi, Jenny. How are you? Hi, everybody.
Patty Horton is Representative Adam Schiff's campaign director. She's worked for him for many years. And I even read about her in his book. So,
Yeah. I think I was the driver.
it's really, really good to have you guys here. As we all know, chief among those that are leading the charge for ethics and decency in Congress is Representative Adam Schiff, who, as chair of the Intelligence Committee, prosecuted, of course, the first impeachment of the former president. He serves on the January 6th Select Committee and is now a best-selling author of a memoir that I describe as a harrowing and sometimes very funny international crime expose, Midnight in Washington. And according to his book, he's actually been through Reading more than a few times, but usually at 3 a.m. on Amtrak. So he's going to be here today helping us elect new colleagues in Congress. And for California's CD1, that means he'll no longer have to put up with that skiff storming Doug LaMalfa. So we're going to now, to welcome him, we have a special musical tribute from a self-described progressive feminist, opinionated Jewish mother who writes and posts comedy songs every week, people, on YouTube. A psycho supermom and awesome piano player too, Lauren Mayer.
Great. Well, thank you for that introduction. And I just want to say it's a pleasure to be here.
I'm not seeing the representative.
I saw something in the chat.
He was as an attendee. I just
Oh,
switched
he's an attendee. Okay. So we're going to upgrade him.
The joys.
I think that worked.
That worked. Great. All right. So Representative Schiff, I don't know if you heard some of that intro, but we do have a special additional intro for you that we're going to let Lauren present to you if she's back on. Yeah, she is.
Yes, I'm back on. So I just was starting to say, as you all know, Congressman Schiff has inspired admiration, political engagement, campaign energy, and of course, social media fandom. But what you may not know is he has also inspired a torch song. Though I've tried, I no longer can hide my feelings so fervent for a certain dedicated, understated civil servant. Oh, Adam Schiff, that terrific committee chairman, is a great legislator, but also a kind and fair man who sure knows his Constitution, and he may be our nation's solution. And what makes him even cooler and brighter, he's a book and screenplay writer. This mild-mannered vegan politician from Burbank, some say might resemble a friendly branch manager from some obscure bank. It rhymes, but his grit on the Intel Committee is off the chart. And that's why Adam Schiff is the chairman of my heart. Now that he's famous, his name has been discovered. So you know he's a nice Jewish boy who went to Stanford and to Harvard. But he's modest. In fact, he's the opposite of what a snob is. And as his license plate says, he doesn't roll on Shabbos. Such a mensch. Each speech at the impeachment trial was truly a stunner. He has endurance to spare because he's literally a marathon runner. Shredding GOP nonsense apart, not just dreamy, he's extremely smart. Oh, Adam Schiff, you're the chairman of my heart. At hearings, your questions devastate me. I wish you'd interrogate me. Democrats have found their man while I plots because I've got the hots for this rare man. And I know you're happily married, so am I. I just mean I have the hots for you politically and intellectually. Oh, forgive this riff, Adam Schiff, you're the chairman of my heart. Subpoena me, and I'll testify I adore you. Politically and intellectually, that is.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
That was a perfect tribute to our national hero, and we're so pleased to have you here live from Washington, D.C., the Honorable Adam Schiff.
Lauren, that was amazing. Oh my God, that was hilarious.
Well, every great hero deserves a song, Congressman, and you sure do.
Well, thank you. You sing beautifully, and you made my day.
Oh my gosh. I hope somebody takes a screenshot of this so I can prove this happened.
Oh, that was incredible. I just wish my wife could have seen that.
Well, I think they're going to record it. So please apologize to her. I am not trying to hit on you.
That was hilarious. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Lauren. That's great.
Well,
So
that was such a treat. I'm sorry. That was such a treat. Thank you for organizing that.
Of course. And of course, you can see that one on YouTube. We'll give you the link. I'm going to give you the floor, and then we'll come back for some Q&A, and just like to hear from you.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you to Shasta County Democrats. Such a great pleasure to join you at such a challenging time in the country. And thank you for everything you do. Thank you for all the volunteer hours, for all of the passion that you bring to public service and to our country. I'm just so very grateful to you. I've, of course, read about what a challenging time this has been in Shasta. And what you've experienced, sadly, is a phenomenon that we're seeing around the country. What the Republicans seem to have learned from the failed insurrection was that the way to tear down our democracy is not necessarily with a violent attack on the Capitol, but rather by using the instruments of democracy to tear democracy down itself. And so you see these concerted efforts often focused at now very local officials, particularly officials that have responsibility over elections, to try to replace independents and nonpartisan officials with partisans beholden to the big lie. Those who will overturn the next election if their candidate loses. And this is how democracies come to an end. You see even low-level meritocratic, technocratic elections officials being run out of town with death threats. So it's a very precarious moment for the country, as we've all been transfixed watching the scenes half a world around, half a world away in Ukraine. And we've marveled at the courage and resilience of the Ukrainian people. In particular, I keep coming back to an image from the very early days of the war when an older Ukrainian man threw himself, excuse me, allergies, not COVID, I hope and expect, because I keep testing negative. But watching an older Ukrainian man throw himself in front of a tank, and that tank lurched to a stop and then start up again and lurch to a stop, I marveled at the courage of that man and what he was willing to do to protect his country and its democracy. And it made me ask myself, what are we willing to do here at home to defend ours? Because our job is so much easier, requires so much less than what those brave people in Ukraine are undergoing. But nonetheless, our democracy is at risk as well. It's at risk through a new generation of Jim Crow laws all around the country, being based on this big lie of fraud in the last election. and initiatives and actions like you have seen all too close to home by trying to use a lot of out-of-state, even dark money to go after local officials with an eye to replacing them with those that will adhere to an extreme agenda, which includes overturning elections that their party loses. So I want to thank you for your steadfastness in the face of this kind of hostility and challenge and difficulty. We have a very important role to play in the history of our country at a time when our democracy is most at risk. And so I was really flattered to get your invitation to come join you today, and very much look forward to our discussion.
Great, thank you so much. And I hope in our virtual new world, you can imagine the thunderous applause in our grateful hearts. So I'm going to also bring in one of our officers. See if I can do this. We've had a few technical difficulties. He's our committee officer. He's also a former naval officer and a gentleman, Cork McGowan, and he's going to moderate the questions that we received online and in the chat. Cork?
Thank you. Well, first of all, Congressman, thank you very much for being here. It's an honor. Given our times, we've had a number of questions on a broad spectrum of issues. Our time with you is limited, and we seldom ever have the opportunity to interact with an individual who is deeply involved in the issues of the day. So deeply involved in the issues of the day. So anyway, we'll go on with our questions that were submitted before the meeting and some during the meeting. So how has the Russian invasion of Ukraine impacted the work of the January 6th committee?
Well, Cork, thank you so much for your service to the country, and thanks for moderating our discussion today.
Thank you.
In terms of the war in Ukraine, I wear two hats in the Congress, as you know, as chair of the Intel Committee, but also as a member of the January 6th Committee. The war in Ukraine has most particularly impacted the Intelligence Committee. And so much of our time in that committee is devoted to analyzing what the Russians are doing, helping Ukraine get real-time intelligence to better defend itself. And the administration, I must say, has very skillfully used intelligence and declassified intelligence in a way I have not seen before. And in the run-up to the war, as you'll recall, the administration made public a lot of what we knew about Putin's plan to invade Ukraine, that it would be a massive invasion, that they would try to essentially encircle Kyiv and install some kind of a puppet regime. And as the war progressed, we've disclosed that the Russians may be planning a false flag operation involving the use of chemical or biological weapons. And the administration has disclosed that we're aware of Russian overtures to China to get Chinese help in the war. And by disclosing this in the way the administration has, I think it's had a very powerful impact. By disclosing the intel before the war, it stripped naked the aggression of the Russians, Putin's unprovoked war on Ukraine. And I think that helped amass support in Europe for this most punishing set of sanctions ever. And disclosing now the danger of a chemical or biological weapons false flag operation. If the Russians do that and they try to blame Ukraine, we will have exposed the infamy of what the Russians are doing. And by calling out the Chinese, we are letting President Xi know that if he does get involved in helping Russia, the stain of the murder of innocent civilians in Ukraine will be on his hands as well. In terms of the January 6th committee, we are progressing, I think, with great rapidity. We've interviewed hundreds of people, and we expect to begin a set of very public hearings in May. And I think those will be enormously important to the public understanding. Finally, in terms of the impact of Ukraine on the work of the January 6th committee, I do think that as the focus of our committee is on the preservation of our democracy, of exposing all of that went into it on January 6th, but in the run-up and the aftermath as well, and the ongoing dangers to our democracy, shedding light on the brutality of authoritarianism, and calling out the dangerous flirtation with authoritarianism in this country. I think people now can see so vividly the dangers of that autocratic drift of the Trump GOP. So it is impacting the work of both of my committees, most particularly Intel, but also January 6th.
Okay, thank you. So the next question, as the largest land invasion in Europe, and maybe the world since World War II, what can you say about the potential use of nuclear weapons in Ukraine?
Well, first of all, I would
If
say that I
anything.
think it's very unlikely. And I know when you're talking about something as devastating as a potential nuclear weapon, that very unlikely is still not very reassuring because it's still a possibility. I don't think this was certainly Putin's intention going into this war. The reason why you can't exclude it completely is that Putin expected to meet little opposition in Ukraine, but Ukraine has fought back fiercely. And as Russian troops get stalemated, and as Putin sees the risks of failure in Ukraine, he has resorted to more and more indiscriminate bombing, the use of cluster weapons that are designed to maximize civilian casualties. We now see the very real possibility of chemical or biological weapons used by the Russians. So with someone as desperate as Putin is becoming, you can't exclude even the worst possibilities. Still,
Okay.
I think it's very unlikely.
Well, that's comforting to hear. Thank you. Regarding the January 6th committee, you spoke a little bit about that already, and I'm not sure what you can tell us about it, but based on the committee's work so far, can you give us some idea of how shocking the revelations might be?
Well, I can't talk about what's not public, but I have to say, even among what's public, to me, it is shocking.
That's a good point.
What people need to realize about January 6th is that there were multiple lines of effort to overturn the presidential election. It wasn't just the 6th. The 6th was the final and most violent part of that effort. But there were efforts to decapitate the leadership of the Justice Department and replace it with people who would promulgate false claims of massive fraud, who would urge states not to send their electors or to delay the sending of electors to that joint session of Congress. There were efforts around the country to file bogus lawsuits. There was pressure put on state and local elections officials as the president's former president's call to the Secretary of State in Georgia demanding 11,780 votes that don't exist demonstrates. All of these things should shock us. And so I would say that what we already know in the public light is shocking. We've certainly learned a lot more that we'll make public during the course of our hearings. But we shouldn't lose our capacity to be stunned by the degree to which these norms of our democracy were broken down. And you'll certainly be seeing more and learning more about that.
Your last point is very well taken. Thank you, because I think it is easy to get numb to this after a while, but obviously keeping it in focus is extremely important to how things work out going forward. So Larry asked, how confident are you that we will see indictments for those involved with the planning and the inciting of the January 6th insurrection?
Well, we've seen some indictments along those lines in the sense that the Justice Department, in addition to going after those who broke into the building and were defiling it, desecrating it, attacking police officers and beating people, the Justice Department has brought seditious conspiracy charges, including against individuals that were not present during that attack. But if your question goes beyond that to, well, what about the people who incited this insurrection, as in the former president? There, I don't know. And it does concern me that certain things that I think should be investigated vis-a-vis the former president do not appear to be investigated. In particular, that call I just referenced between Trump and Secretary Raffensperger, a recorded conversation which, if any of us on this call were in that call, we would be under investigation, and not just by the Fulton County District Attorney in Georgia. We would be under investigation by the Justice Department, but I don't see any sign that that's happening. And that does concern me, particularly since the Justice Department took the position during the Trump presidency that a sitting president could not be prosecuted. If it were now to take the position that a former president similarly cannot be investigated or prosecuted because it would be too controversial or considered too political, then the president becomes above the law, and that is a very dangerous proposition.
Well put, thank you. So Allison asked, if Donald Trump is not charged and convicted of a crime before the 2024 election, do you think he could become president again?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I think we should operate under the expectation that that form of accountability by the Justice Department is not likely to happen, based on what we have seen so far. And it is possible the Justice Department is just working very quietly behind the scenes. But normally when there's a grand jury convened in a high profile case, even though the grand jurors themselves are required to remain, keep the proceedings secret, witnesses brought before the grand jury are under no such obligation. And so I think we would know about it if that was happening. And so I would say that we should not count on a prosecutor to hold the president accountable. I think that we are going to have to hold him accountable at the ballot box because, number one, he is running, and number two, we underestimated him once before at our peril, and we dare not underestimate him again. I don't think that Trump or Trumpism will be defeated and banished to the dustbin of history until he is defeated once again.
Okay, thank you. So Linda asked, what are your thoughts regarding any restoration or updating of the fairness doctrine, which, as you're aware, I'm sure, is a former federal policy regarding television and radio broadcasters to present contrasting viewpoints on political issues? And so as far as restoring that would address our current, I think it's fair to say that we have a propaganda media environment, and including social media platforms. Do you see any hope in something like that coming back into play?
You know, sadly, I don't think that's very likely, for the reason that the problem has really changed since the days of the fairness doctrine, in that back then, and I'm old enough to have rushed back to my dormitory to watch Walter Cronkite's last broadcast. Back then, we got our news predominantly from 3 networks that were using the public airwaves to get news out to the American people. Because the public airways are owned by the public, the government could impose a fairness requirement. But now most people get their news from social media, or they get it on cable news. And because those are private pipelines, we don't have the same ability to insist on a fairness doctrine. And so I don't think that that's a remedy that will work under these circumstances. There are ways to attack the problem of misinformation online. And I think either doing away with Section 230 that immunizes the social media companies for any harms that are done by people on their platform is one potential answer, or at least providing only a narrow safe harbor if these companies don't amplify, set their algorithms to amplify for hate and anger and bile, which is currently, it seems, how they are structured. They're structured for engagement, which often translates into anger and lies and venom. Dealing with the private cable companies, though, is even more difficult. Here, if you look at what's going on right now, Fox News is carrying a Kremlin propagandist in the form of Tucker Carlson. The last time I was on Tucker Carlson's show 4 years ago, I told him he should move his show to RT, the Russia Today channel, because he was doing nothing but carrying Kremlin water. And now, tragically, they are rebroadcasting him on RT because
I've heard.
he is one of the most useful idiots as far as the Russians are concerned. And I think the only way to change that is to put pressure on the companies that are still advertising, not just on his show, but on any show on Fox, if they're going to be carrying propaganda like that.
Good point. Joel and some others have asked, after the Trump debacle, for lack of a better term, why are the Democrats polling so low? And how can we better highlight our successes, such as the infrastructure bill? And what can we do here, if anything, locally? What can we do about that? So why are we polling so low? How can we better highlight our successes, like the infrastructure bill?
It's a very good question. And I would say that, first of all, inflation and concerns about the economy, I think, are a drag on the Democratic ticket. Likewise, continuing concerns over the pandemic have also, I think, discouraged Americans about whether we're heading in the right direction. And those forces always have an impact on the party in power. But there are things that we can do about it. And this gets to the other parts of your question or questions, which is we need to do a much better job talking about what we are doing to help improve the economy. And in fact, all of the improvements we've made in the economy through things like the rescue plan, which saved so many Americans' lives through accelerating the vaccination program, but also saved countless millions of small businesses, help people put bread on the table, keep a roof over their head. That plan really rescued our economy. And last year, we created 6.7 million new jobs, stronger job growth than at any time in US history. We also had our unemployment rate drop beyond anyone's expectation. Our economy grew last quarter faster than any other economy in the world, including China, which has not been the case in I think, 40 years. So we have a powerful story to tell. And we need to do a much better job telling it. And I think at the local level, you can help us tell that story, help us tell it locally. And indeed, that's so important because of what we were talking about in the last question, which is people that live in the Fox bubble and only get their information from there. They're not going to be tuning into other channels, but they may listen to what people in their local community have to say or what they write in their local paper to the editor. And so you have a capacity of breaking through those propaganda bubbles. And I think that local grassroots work that you do, calling people, texting people, knocking on doors, those are going to be critical. The ground game is going to be critical to our success.
I think we have time for maybe one more, Cork.
Okay. Let's see. What can we do to, Sharon asked, what can we do to support and protect voting rights going forward?
Well, that's a very important question because I think really among the most critical dangers to our democracy are these efforts to disenfranchise people, and particularly people of color, but also these efforts to change the personnel and the infrastructure of our elections by running out of town these local elections officials, or by changing who gets to administer elections and putting in place people who will not do so in a diligent, nonpartisan way, but people who will do so with an eye towards changing the result. And so I think it's vitally important that at the very local level, that we work together, you and Shasta County, to make sure that every eligible voter has their vote counted. Where there are changes in the rules, that we make sure that we help people overcome them. And outside of Shasta County and outside of California, because of course California has been very good about this, there are ways that we can help online in a number of voter registration drives, but also efforts to make sure that people in states that have enacted these new efforts to try to make it more difficult for them to vote, that we help them overcome those difficulties by informing them of what they need to do There are, for example, in Texas, which has already had a primary election, tens of thousands of people whose absentee ballots were rejected because of these new disenfranchisement efforts. And working with grassroots organizations to make sure that those votes can be counted when they vote in the general election is going to be vitally important. Rallying to the defense of your local officials who are under threat right now, that is going to be critically important too. So these are some of the key things that I think we can do. Now I understand that it's my good fortune to introduce your congressional candidate. Is that right?
Yes, we'd be pleased to have you introduce our next guest. It's so exciting just to even hear you say Shasta County, as if people actually know it exists. We're more akin to Texas, as you were saying, and our committee, even though we have a lot of work here, has done quite a bit of work in other states, in swing districts and in Georgia. And so your words are really well taken. But we'd love for you to introduce our next guest. Thank you.
Well, thank you. You know, we have been so fortunate. This has been, I think, one of the most promising things of an otherwise pretty dark chapter of our history. But we have been so fortunate that some of the best people have ever run for Congress are running for Congress now, and have done so over the last couple cycles. I think in the same way that many people joined the service after 9/11 because they wanted to defend our country, many have, in the wake of Trump and Trumpism, decided to run for office as yet another way to serve, another call to service. And it's not a surprise that many of these same candidates are also members of our armed forces and our veterans. And so some of the very best and brightest of our new members come from those ranks. And you have one in your ranks who is now running for Congress, Max Steiner. Max served with distinction, earning a combat infantry badge. And Max, I have to tell you, when I saw that you won that accolade, it brought me right back to one of the hearings with Bill Taylor, a Vietnam veteran, who was one of the witnesses in the Ukraine investigation. And he was asked a series of questions by my colleague, Sean Patrick Maloney, during that hearing, which I thought were among the most powerful testimony. And he asked Bill Taylor, this career diplomat, about going to West Point, which he had attended. And he said, you attended West Point? And Bill Taylor said, yes, I did. And he said, and you graduated pretty high in your class, didn't you? And Bill Taylor said, yes. And he said, how high? And Taylor said 5. And he was asked, out of how many? And Taylor said 800. And then he was asked, you graduated number 5 out of class of 800. You could have probably chosen where you wanted to go and how you wanted to serve. You chose the infantry during Vietnam. Yes, that's right. And while you were in Vietnam, you earned any number of distinctions. Well, yes, I did. And he listed them. And I think there was a Silver Star, there may have been a Purple Heart, but he said the one that is most important to me is my combat infantry badge. That's the one that means the most to me. And when I saw that that was the same that you had earned, and knowing that this wonderful, highly decorated combat vet thought that was the most important he'd received, told me a lot about your service. And by the way, Bill was asked, given your experience in Vietnam, what was it like for you to go out to the Eastern Front in Ukraine and know that Ukrainians were dying, fighting and dying then every week? Now it's, of course, every minute. What was it like to know that military aid to Ukraine was being withheld by the President of the United States for a political favor? How did that make you feel? And his answer was bad. And I'm sure you can appreciate that sentiment. But Max, I want to thank you for your service in the military. I want to thank you for your service in the Foreign Service. You have just an exemplary background, and you're exactly the kind of person that we want in Congress. I'm thrilled you're running, and just gives me great pleasure to introduce a great patriot who's once again putting himself on the line, and that is Max Steiner. Max?
Congressman Schiff, thank you very much. This is a very strange introduction. To earn so many accolades from the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. So thank you. Thank you for your words. Thank you for your support. Thank you for coming here to Shasta County. For everyone else on this call, thank you as well for your support so far and in the future. We are going to take this fight to Doug LaMalfa. He has betrayed our nation's trust, and he does not deserve to be reelected. It is my honor and privilege to represent you as a Democratic candidate, and it will be my honor and privilege to represent you as a congressman for this district. And not just you, but also your neighbors, some of them who will vote for Trump, some of them who did vote for Trump, some of them who will probably wish that they could vote for Trump again. But these are the people we need to reach out to, right? It is great to have this talk. It is excellent to hear from someone as intelligent and worldly as Representative Schiff. But our fight is much more in the trenches. And so this has been a lovely interlude in that. And I look forward. Jenny, I'm not sure if you want me to take some questions.
Yes, I'm gonna let you speak, Max, but I did want to just say, because I want to let Adam Schiff go on to his very busy life. It's a little later where he is in DC, but I did want to let him know that there were many other questions that people had for you. And one of them was from a friend, Terry Hostler, in the chat, and she said, you know, what more can the state and national parties do to help defeat Doug LaMalfa? It seems like they think they cannot be defeated, that he cannot be defeated. Well, we disagree, and we just want to plant that notion. We know we're not considered a swing district, but we're thrilled to have a candidate like Max, and also in CD3, Kermit Jones, really wonderful candidates, and hope you'll keep them topmost in your mind, while the rest of us also work to help get these swing districts, you know, locked in November.
I certainly will. And Max, I look forward to getting to know you better, and Jenny and Shasta County Democrats, thank you for all you're doing. I will certainly pass on that message to the DCCC and my colleagues in the Democratic caucus. We're so grateful for all you're doing, and we want to be supportive.
Yeah, anytime Sean Patrick Maloney wants to come to one of our meetings, we'd love that too.
Excellent. I will let him know.
Thank
but
you.
Will he get a song?
We will get one from Lauren, yes, and we'll send you the links so that your wife can hear it, so Eve can revel in it. It's pretty wonderful.
Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much for inviting me. Take care, everybody.